we are like shifting our weight on this pulse, and working with musical groove. The idea is to release your weight into the rhythm of that pulse, so kind of following in.
So, hello. Today we are dancing with Andreas Berchtold. And we met when I started working here at Stockholm University of the Arts, or it was probably Doc, maybe.
Yeah, I guess it was. Yeah.
And you've been a great inspiration. I got to see you present your MA theses and your work around that, and then your amazing work with the research catalogue, which we will hopefully link in the description.
Yeah.
And we've got to work together quite a bit, with my work with improvisation and yours with folk, and all our different responsibilities as well. And then also there was another thing I was thinking about that and recently I've got to see you transition into your PhD here at the university. And also I saw you perform once, I think, at the music school. Am I remembering that correctly?
At Musikhögskolan?
Yeah. It was maybe a multimedia...
Yeah, the Dancing Dots. It is within Olof Misgeld's PhD research, yes.
Sorry for surprising you with that.
No. I just thought, what was that? Yeah.
I was just trying to capture a little bit, like, I've been around your work in different ways and stuff. And I mean, we work obviously as colleagues, but also artistically and as thinking partners.
To me, actually, it's not informal in that sense because we are at work, but we have also had a lot of conversations in hallways and sitting on each other's what is called desks, and that has been also a meeting place, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. And but if people don't know you who are listening, how would you introduce yourself?
It's interesting with like situating your work and introducing oneself, but in this context then, maybe first of all I would say thank you for the invitation. I'm really happy to do this. And then I would say that we are sitting in Studio 1 in the basement at Brynällvägen 58, which is in SKH, and it's a quite big dance studio sitting on the floor. And my name is Andreas Berchtold, as you said. In my profession, I have been working as a dancer and as teacher in dance. And also not just teaching, but within the educational context of dance. So that is a bit of a difference to me, but I have I identify very much with this situation of teaching, and but also as a dancer, and those are both present to me, and they inform each other very much. Like also moving between artistic context of working as my experience of working as an independent group with some dancers, or working with a specific choreographer and being like co-creating something together with people in that context, and working and meeting people in learning contexts, and how much that has also informed my own the way I know things. And I can also say that I have had the position as assistant professor in folk dance at dance pedagogy department, as it was called. I've had it for 10 years, and I still have a position at what is now called the subject area of dance pedagogy. Yeah. But as you also mentioned, I have also since a year, although I'm doing it on half-time, so I'm quite in the beginning, I have a PhD position also here at SKA, Stockholm University of the Arts.
Yeah.
Maybe I also want to say that I'm 56 years old. I grew up in Stockholm, and my father came to Stockholm from Austria, and my mother came to Stockholm from Norrköping. So they met in Stockholm, and they were both going to Stockholm to work. So that is also one thing. And for some reason, in the beginning of the 1970s, in the context where my parents were, it seemed reasonable to put their child in a folk dance group. So I started dancing in what was at the time the folk dance community in Stockholm. So it was in Hornstull, and it was a once a week thing. And it was actually a coincidence, I would say. It was our neighbors, my friends that I played with when I was a kid. I think their mother took this initiative, and as I said, it seemed reasonable for parents at that time. And already there I can now see that there was like let's say a clash between where they were at the time and what the dancing was that I experienced then. So they were quite like different aesthetics, let's call it that for the moment. Yeah, nowadays I live like since quite 20 years ago or something. I live 10 mil, 100 kilometers outside of Stockholm, because I worked at the Folkhögskola for many years, where there was a dance education. So I kind of stay there, but I feel very much as a Stockholmer
because
still.
The Folkhögskola is, where is that?
There was this dance education at the Folkhögskola that is called Vegar Vårdal. It's a bit north of a city that is called Norrtälje. But then this education moved from there and is now organized in another place.
It's always interesting, these entries we have into dance. And how they situate us.
Maybe one more thing.
Is
that working at Stockholm University of the Arts with experience from different folk dance fields in Sweden, Scandinavia, Europe, that's where I have moved. That becomes a thing moving into a context where dance can be many different things, and I also for many years dealt with a kind of a genre being understood, and maybe understanding myself also in like a genre position in dance, which is interesting in relation to artistic practice, social dancing, and what these experiences does and what they become in a certain context. And moving between has been really concrete experience to me, moving between different ways of knowing in dance.
I think, and also that's where my interest really intersects, I think, because for me, I got so interested in like how do groups work, how does, like artistically, how do we work with people, how does dance exist beyond the presentational form, like how does it exist in experience, and where does that experience manifest? And I think encountering your work here at the school through social dance, through the lens of social dance, and also through encountering sort of dance educational approaches and trying to think through how does dance situate itself in society and what role does it play and stuff. For me, these have been so rewarding as questions and so on. And it is interesting, that question of like how they blur or how they intertwine or how they play a role. And we were just wanted to say that I just got to watch one of your classes, and your students are preparing for examination, and there is this big question around own practice and what is interest in there, and how does it manifest itself, and is the interest for teaching the material or knowing the material or artistically liking or being with the material. Like, there's a lot of things come up in that space which are really exciting. And so thank you for inviting me in.
Yeah, it was it always also give me like having you there makes me see things also in a bit with a bit different, in a bit of a different way maybe. Do you know what I also want to say? I thought about that in terms of situating. That it might be that I need you to help me with the English, because we are doing this in English, and I kind of accept stumbling on some words and maybe not always having the nuances in English, but we are also going to dance together, so I'm fine, but just
absolutely.
to say languaging is also interesting.
And I think that's
in terms of doing
a podcast exactly.
Yeah.
So actually, when I started this desire, it was from an educational perspective in a way. I was wanting to create educational videos around practice and around choreography, and I kept on trying to think, what would the visual be, you know? And I couldn't imagine what I would put in front of the camera, and maybe that could speak to a lot to your research catalogue. Like, what images would work? And then I got very inspired by your daughter, in fact, Vegar Vårdal, who has a fantastic podcast, and others who have made fantastic podcasts around dance. And I started to think, well, what if this way of trying to frame the dance or to support the being with the dance, what if we use the audio medium only, and then the dancing is up to for interpretation and is only glimpses. And I think it's for in a way I like the failing of language, because it because we were also speaking before this, like, how much do we edit? How much should it be just a natural conversation? And I think there's something in there for me of trying to capture the struggle with this languaging.
Yeah,
exactly.
And to me, it's when I say that, it is not an idea of not having an idea of being very correct or being able to say things. But just kind of acknowledging the situation that I can be here with you.
No, exactly. It's and thank you, because it's something I haven't done. I haven't addressed the fact that I'm in a Swedish context often and speaking English often.
But it also depends on who you are talking to, of course.
Of course. But so to situate not only who you are, but to maybe situate where you are, like what you're busy with. Maybe you can say, or what we will do today with each other, with the people listening.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm busy with, and this actually goes also into my research then, of course. It's actually the question on how we can learn from each other in dance. And often when I start talking about it, people are responding like, yes, of course we can. And I also have that hope, but the question of how is really, I think it's really interesting, and there are things to deal with there. What is kind of, when we today move into a practice that I do, what becomes the knowing within that? Or how do I like fill the room with certain values, ideas, aesthetics, political statements, and so on. And I mean, also the publication that I did in Vis that you mentioned. In that work, I'm kind of dealing with the relation between my own constitution and someone else's comprehension of the practice, both in different ways. So I mean, the concepts are from Krista Parkinson's research, and she's also talking about plasticity as a quality between the comprehension and the constitution. So, like staying with our different now it's language again, perceptions maybe, or what this thing that we do, this practice that we do, what it becomes and what it does to us, and how we can relate to that. So in that sense, I'm also very happy to be here with you and inviting into something and kind of try to work with it in some specific terms from my side and see what that does to whatever we can you and I can deal with, working with it.
Yeah.
But maybe should I be more precise about what it is?
No, I mean, it's great. I mean, maybe I can recap just for myself so I know that I'm understanding, because it's quite complex and it's quite nice. Like you have these specific terms and formulations. So the one that I really caught was how can we learn from each other? That seems to be really central. And then the introduction of these concepts of knowing, values. I think that might read ideas, political statements, like that. What are we knowing? Like what's being learned? So more practically, what are we?
What are we going to do? We are. I would say that we are going to work with slang Polska, and that is then a concept in itself, and it is also actually that name is used for many different things, so it doesn't mean one thing.
Okay.
And the specific slang Polska practice that I'm inviting to today is something that I have worked with for many years. And there are also, when I think about it, I enter into a practice where there are many other persons around, people I've been dancing with, people that I learned from, people that I worked with questioning this, people that do this in different ways than I do, because in times it has shifted, and I thought about referencing here, but we will see. I could do a long list, but I don't do that now, but just to say it.
And I mean, and maybe if we don't get time, we can write it,
so
that people who listening can have a deeper connection.
Yeah. So, and we are going to do like a kind of a part of this practice, and that it will be walking, and it is also a music practice with music. I almost said the music, turned it around, and it's a bit like that. I've also been working a lot with this dance and music together with colleague and friend. His name is Patrik Andersson, and he's playing violin and harding fiddle, and we have been dealing with this for many years in artistic contexts, in teaching, and just on our own, like studio practice, him and me. Yeah. So I will choose a recording from YouTube where Patrik is playing together with another musician. His name is Vegar Vårdal. And the invitation today is that we are going to walk to this music, and there are layers of pulses, there are layers of rhythms that you can relate to while walking. I would say that it is, or sometimes also when I work with this, I say kind of going more for experiencing than executing. But there, I would be interesting together with you to also try to be a bit specific about what this, what I'm working with, like in terms of specific things, and maybe we can get back to that afterwards. What you notice and what I notice that I will kind of deal with together with you.
And that sounds great. Then we have a clear plan.
Yeah.
We're going to play this music, which we will link, so people can hear it as well, and perhaps even try it as well. And we're going to walk to it, and we're going to have a focus on, what is it? Yeah, what are we working with a little bit? The sort of rather than just the experience, also have a little bit of a towards the execution.
It's also interesting how I can say this, because it will be.
It's not verbal, maybe.
No, we will see. Maybe both.
Yeah.
But moving anyway. Yeah. I think we will talk during the thing. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, we'll come back in a bit, and then we'll reflect. Well, let's see.
Yeah, and I usually, you can choose for how long you do this, but to me, I work with quite long durations. It would be like, if I would go on my own, like into the studio, it will be at least 2 hours. Sometimes I work during the day. I've also been working like 6 times a day for a week with groups, kind of staying with this practice. So I don't know if it's long or short, but trying to describe it like that, it always depends. Yeah.
I mean, we're just dipping in. It's rich. Thank you. Okay, we'll come back.
We are like shifting our weight on this pulse, and working with musical groove. The idea is to release your weight into the rhythm of that pulse, so kind of following in.
Great. We already started.
Yeah.
And I think what was really interesting is actually how much reflection is a big part of your practice of doing this walking. And and also maybe we can recap a little bit, because we were speaking after the first reflection that it was not that I described it as a sort of unlearning. Like you asked me, what did you experience in the first walking?
Yeah.
And I described a few things to do with direction and like some of the thoughts that came up and ways of negotiating the task. And then you said, no, I'm going to propose this, but it's not to teach you. It's more to sort of understand somehow. And, this sort of conversational quality of like being with each other's knowledge and being affected by each other's knowledge. And then sort of in a full circle, that's kind of where we arrived at the end. We were speaking now just about how almost the form is coming out of the encounter. And you were saying, well, actually, you don't have to have the arms. We can just stay with the groove. But you also said, when describing the groove, but the groove is maybe not a thing which is exactly the same for each person, and it's a space within it which both person exists with the music and the different pulses in the music. that these forms emerge in these encounters, and then you went on to say that, and I have different maybe ways with other people. Maybe form isn't the right word, but I'm trying to describe the emergence of an agreement or something, or an understanding, or a knowledge, or a dance. Perhaps dance is the best word.
Yeah, maybe dance is the best word.
And then we also highlighted how it's not that it's that it would stay that form, of course. It's that we would be always sort of approaching some sort of agreement.
But and I thought it was interesting in the beginning where this urge or this impulse we were walking forwards, and this impulse to start to deal with directions, and I kind of understood you as saying that from as a need of not staying in that just walking forward thing. And I think that it was something there with that I think relates to my practice, that, and maybe to duration also, that it can be about staying with something. And not at least not too quickly leave it with like the big changes in whatever that would mean. Like, for instance, directions in the room. What if we stay with this and see what it holds? And I think that is like a thing. I many years ago here at the university, there was one person working with students that I met a lot, and that also had this folk dance as their practice, but someone coming in from other ways of knowing in dance, and after working with the students came to me and said, Andreas, it seems to be the same thing all the time, but never the same way. So that is something like repetition and being with something. It might seem as the same thing, and then notice what is happening within that, and that it can never be the same way. And what are the shifts, and what are the things that we get interested in and start to work with.
I think for me, actually, one of the things that came up in exactly this desire to move away was I felt like the walking was too complicated. And I feel like it echoes a little bit what you're saying. Like, and it's funny where we place simplicity and complexity. Because for me, in a way, I knew to really continue working and going deeper with the walking, I had to deal with a lot of detail and big questions. And I was looking for a relief from having to actually interrogate those things and find other things, like using the heel to go backwards or something like that, rather than to stay with like, well, what is it, and to really go into how can I be with this. And then afterwards you explained some of the technique, I would say, that you use, and the thing that really appeared for me was how relaxed it was, and which is really interesting in terms of a technique, right? That it's not a technique of rigidity or fixity. It's a technique to somehow be more at ease inside the walking, which is very interesting.
First of all, I think it's interesting that we ended up with me describing my constitution in this walking, because you started reflecting on all these different possibilities when it comes to techniques of walking. So then I said, okay, let me try to talk about how I understand it, and the specificity of how you are now saying that it was relaxed. Was that the word? Yeah. To me, that is also related to the concept of groove, and I think I have learned from other dance practices that also deal with rhythm. I've also learned from musicians, percussionists, and Patrik, that I work a lot with, and how he's holding his instrument, ideas of how to generate this specific groove in music. So I'm also influenced by ideas on how to be specific in relation to rhythm and skill. I think I would talk about skill also, and this constitution of relaxing oneself into relaxing. Is that it's this
being at
again.
Ease as well? I said which
something with letting go to be able to be rhythmical.
Yeah, and I mean, and there's something I was after watching the class as well, like that you're dealing with a lot of aspects that exist in most of dance, but exactly staying with it. And what was it that the student said, that it's always the same but in different ways, sort of thing. And I think that it's really like I had this formulation or this question, like, what is the hardest thing to set? And it's a little bit like, how do we find these agreements of I was calling it form at the beginning of our reflection now, but maybe not form or like the dance, but how we find these agreements and allow them to continue to emerge within what is quite a complex situation. Like, and because there's an insistence somehow on trying to meet within that complexity and be with what emerges around that meeting and the emergence of that space in a way.
But I don't even know if I'm. Let's say you now make me think of, when you mentioned form. That to me, what we did now as a practice is kind of part of something where there is also a form. And it has been interesting during the years that I can see this form as a very simple let's say form. I could show it to you and we could do it like in a few minutes. But then the question of what can be within that form, what does it hold, what is meaningful in the doing of that, what is relational between you and me and in relation to whoever is playing this music, and then all these complexities kind of enters into the form. So maybe talking about dances and dancing, and how maybe also I have experience of this form of dancing that I'm doing as form very much, and being kind of longing for something more meaningful within that. So looking for whatever that could be by doing it. And then this interesting, going back to staying with the walking forward thing. To see what that holds, I have to kind of. To me, it's like let's call it a way of doing it, to stay with it, to see what it can hold.
Exactly. And I mean, I almost wanted to say it asks a little bit the question of what is dance, and I know that's not a great not a great question really, but because exactly is it only the form, exactly this, right? It's in the dancing, and I think and the complexity that emerges with music and performance perhaps, or expression and being with it, like there's a lot of complexities there. And I was thinking about, so for example, if we do it alone, walk with the music, it's potentially it can be very easy to sort of fulfill that space in a way. But the second you do it with someone, there becomes a whole new complexity. And the fact that it's if I really simplify it, it's walking with someone. It has it's a very simple task, if we were going to call it a task or a score, but what emerges out of it to find agreement and to find a dance in it, that is a sort of beautiful exploration and creativity and form perhaps, and emergence of something very beautiful in that space somehow.
We didn't say that now, but we also ended up walking with touching, holding each other in different ways. So that was also part of our doing, reflecting practice now.
Yeah, and you spoke about how we're walking together in the same room, but we can also choose how we're touching. Like, it can have more pull, and it can be more directed, it can have more support, and it can be without touch. We can try to stay in the same groove, standing next to walking next to each other. No, it's really beautiful. I think this entrance as well, like dissecting it, bringing it to this simple score, walk with the music, and then start to ask questions around how do we do that? How do we do it together? Could touching aid in that? Could it? Because this say.
Yeah, it's just to me, it's also interesting when you start talking about it as a score, and I have some kind of understanding what score can be. And I can almost see this dance as a score, this thing that we did now with the walking practice as a score, of course. But it's also interesting that I very seldom use that way of talking about it. And during the last weeks, I've been, as I am now both teaching and doing PhD, and moving very much around this university and ending up in seeing different practices. And I also start to notice that score means very different things in different rooms here, even in our university. So it's and also how it can become a bit of a fashion to use it, and then you start using it on whatever assignment, and maybe you can, but it's just interesting with such a concept, how it starts floating around there.
I say why. I mean, I was actually going to move into it a little bit. So I'm working with improvisation, as you know. Yeah. And one of the questions I have is, what makes improvisation, and is it an opposition to set choreography? And so it's within this space, and then the emergence of scores sort of hold the place of ambiguity. They're not set, nor are they improvised. They're both set and improvised. And that's why I find it an interesting term. And I did use it a little bit of throwaway. I said task and score because I find actually I don't know if I should be using score in this context. But the thing that I really wanted to bring up was a little bit. There's a thing I notice in improvising where you are given a task or a score. You're given an improvisation task, I should say, to be clear with language. And the improvisation task is usually impossible. Like if you really try to say what the intention of the task is, it usually has an element of impossibility. However, as a person dancing it or being with the improvisation task, you use that impossibility as a way to produce different types of attention and different types of like concentration almost with the thing. And I feel like sometimes the student or the person dancing the task can get stuck with the impossibility. There can be a place of friction and discomfort because they feel like I'm failing. And the solution to that is always to compromise on how precise, how close to the impossibility you encourage yourself. And I wanted to maybe speak to that. Like, we are trying to walk together to the music, and to make a comparison, I would say there's an impossibility hidden in there. And we are insisting on it still, but at some point also we need to say, don't worry. Don't worry about the impossibility. Let's just walk. And I think maybe that's what I was speaking about with ease and relaxation as well.
I see. No, but yeah, because this idea of dancing this together, and if it is related to groove again, I'm very, at ease with the idea of that it is not about being exactly the same. It's about relating to each other in every like moment of the music, let's say, knowing that groove is like not being able to be like exactly the same. So if I can like lean into that idea, and now when I say it, I can also reflect on that. Sometimes in teaching, this idea of working with timing, being on time, working with that kind of concept in relation to music can also be like you become stiff because there is, as if it was a certain moment of hitting the beat that would be the right, but that is not how I relate to groove. It's a and yet I think you said a common place where we are not exactly at the same.
And yet I feel like you're holding that tension. So when you introduced the pulse, maybe you spoke about the main pulse, and then you spoke about the double pulse, and you spoke about halftime, and you spoke about the double, and then the third one was there was a rhythm of 3 as well, which for me was too beyond my thing. I was thinking, oh, maybe I'm getting it, but and of course within there you could draw a sort of a desire to be like very precise, like am I doing all 5 of these pulses?
To me it's more like if I walk on the, like, let's call it the main pulse, the most obvious, and Patrik is also tapping his feet, so you hear that sound when he's playing. To be able to relate to that in a, let's say, precise way, having that intention anyway, is possible when you are listening to the layers of the other pulses. So do is related to So it is like listening to them at the same time.
And I notice this in my body, like when I'm playing with rhythm and pulse, like I notice exactly what you're describing now, but I maybe don't spend time analyzing or attending to it in the same way. But I just wanted to circle back to score as a word, because through this lens for me of between improvisation and choreography, it becomes a very useful term to speak about working within impossibility, because it situates itself as sort of as a contradiction, that it's neither set nor improvised. And I find that extremely productive as a placeholder, because it's still something that directs, and yet it's something that's open to interpretation. And it's in there that the emergence of dance seems to find a voice in an interesting way.
It's interesting because also in this practice that we did today, I have the idea of me improvising also. So although maybe I presented you as something that could be understood as set in a way. So in this practice to me there is improvisation, and of course we could discuss further what that means.
But even because in a way you were leading that's clear. And you even said like, you feel like you're teaching, maybe, or something along those lines. And do you feel you're improvising in that role as well? In that, definitely. I think this is fascinating.
And I can recognize the path, but I also kind of need your experience, how you experience whatever we are doing, to know where we can go with it. So in that sense, but actually you also make me think, when you talk about score and improvising or set, as if that were the only two things to relate to each other. I must also say that, and that is also maybe a interesting discussion to continue, but in my thoughts on how we can learn from each other, I have experience of ideas of openness that I would say are very situated and can only be experienced as open in relation to certain experiences that a certain score maybe is opening up. I sometimes tell this story, and I don't want to be too. I want to say that I still think about this openness, and I want to have a critical view on it, because sometimes when I have been in improvisation contexts, I have, and maybe I say this because I don't have that much experience of it, but I have been in, and sometimes there has been this question: okay, Andreas, why don't you do your thing in this room of improvisation, because this is open? And I can have this feeling of, do you know what, starting to jump around, slapping my legs in rhythmical patterns, it is not possible for me to do this in this room. This room is not open for that, and I'm sure it is done in many different ways, but I'm dealing with this experience anyway, and also because in one presentation on my research that I did some years ago, there was also someone telling me that, Andreas, when you are working here, rhythm becomes the norm in the room, so to say. I'm filling the room all the way out to the walls with rhythm or with certain ideas of what groove is, certain ideas of holding each other. And that made me so aware of, of course I am. I'm kind of filling the room with the practice here now. And that is not whatever. No. It becomes like specific. And that is why I'm also questioning this. Some of ideas where I have related to ideas of openness and what it is open to and what is possible to do in this room. Because sometimes I have had this feeling that they are also filled with ideas all the way out to the walls. Yeah. So there isn't even a little gap close to the wall that would be open to doing whatever. So I think that is a quite interesting thing.
And I hope that I don't come across as producing a dichotomy that we have to all answer to. No. I think it's really just because that's where I'm teaching, that I speak from that lens. Yeah. And what I really appreciate as well is, which I'm also recognizing in actually trying to answer these questions around this dichotomy or dichotomization between improvisation and choreography, is how freedom doesn't exist more in improvisation than it does in set choreography. Because they're interlinked in my mind. Like if improvisation is the opposition to set choreography, improvisation then is a sort of a deeper learnt knowledge that one must know the codifications that are surrounding the set values and codes that are produced through the set notion of choreography, and then should have such a knowledge of it that they can play with it and be spontaneous, which of course that is what we read when we come into an improvisation class, and it's like, well, this is not free, this is not open. And that's where I think scores become an interesting place maybe to speak about, like there's always a score. Like, and it's always somehow and there's scores within scores, and so that exactly right out to the edge of the room. But the thing that I really wanted to point out is this lens on the failure of choreography and improvisation, in my mind, comes from expanded choreography. And within that as a lens, then we have to recognize how all dance is a rebellion against a normative way of behaving in society. When we feel like we're dancing, we are doing something a little bit weird, a little bit at odds with the choreographies around us. So in that sense, that rebellion is a form of freedom making, freedom producing, be it set or improvised. This notion that improvisation is free is, I think, a myth.
Yeah. So maybe what my question is, has already been dealt with in different ways, I'm sure, but it's also interesting to stay with this because also looking at my own practice, sometimes patterns, let's call it norms, habits, things that are done, sometimes they stay, although we think that we have dealt with them, and moved on. So
and I mean, and this is what's so beautiful, is this simple task: come together, walk together. And I wanted to say, I felt this was too short. We're going to have to end. And you said this could be 3-4 hours long, and I'm sure hopefully we will get to walk again, to dance again, to be together again. It was such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I say one last thing on that? Because sometimes also in relation to my practice, it has been like, could I learn this dance from you? Because I want to participate in a party or whatever. And of course, I can show it to you in 2 minutes. So it could be done in that sense, but it could also take forever. Depending on how you deal with it and how you work with it. But anyway, thanks for the invitation again.
I wanted to just quickly, because we have you if people want to get in touch with your work, we will link to the research catalogue and your page at the university.
Yeah.
And VIS, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
And VIS, yeah. Is there any other ways people can meet your work and get to know you better?
Maybe come to some teaching if I do some courses outside of the university. I have been very restrictive with mediating myself. My dance practice actually. The publication on this is definitely there, and hopefully my PhD will be possible to follow that research now during the years when I go on with that. And that is located within SKH then, so that is where I am right now with my work.
And I mean, to join the folk dance scene of Stockholm is one way of getting to know more where you work and how you work. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's such a pleasure.
Thank you. We are like shifting our weight on this pulse and working with musical groove. The idea is to release your weight into the rhythm of that pulse. So kind of following into